Hi there, knife people. Hello, lady and gentlemen. Tonight I'm going to unpack the knives that I shipped to myself from California. If you saw one of these videos, here's the link, then you know that sometimes I go on business to California. And when I'm there, I go shopping in the cool knife shops that they have. They're not big on the gun stores there for some reason, but their knife shops are pretty decent. So I am able to get unbelievable deals there that most of the shops on the East Coast just don't offer. I don't know why that is. And if you wonder which knife am I using to open the box, it's the Benchmade Full Immunity. And this one is marked first production on the blade in the box. And this one also came with me from California, but it rode here in the checked-in package. And I feel like I owe the world a full review on this knife, which will come shortly. So please subscribe to my channel and you will catch it pretty soon. And I will promise you this knife will get a very honest, no BS review. By the way, I'm not affiliated with any knife company or distributor thereof, nor does my livelihood depend on monetizing this channel. So all my reviews are independent and lack an element of greed. And know you're eager for me to get to the Grail knives, but first, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce to you a brand new American company, a newcomer to the world of modern EDC, Buck Knives. In the span of one generation, Buck went from this to what you're about to see. Gone is the blister packaging, and welcome a magnetically sealed box. The recyclable packing paper confetti inside is puzzling to me, and so is this Benchmade style bag in which the knife has arrived. This dark charcoal fat carbon handle material is the best execution of fat carbon that I've seen on any knives, and I've seen a lot of knives. And it's a liner lock knife, which is a departure from their traditional backlock knives. And the grind is beautiful hollow grind. Buck is excelling at the hollow grinds. Let's do some measurements. And for the blade length, we have just a little over 3 inches length and just slightly under 3 inches sharpened edge. The weight is 91.4 grams or 3.22 ounces. Which makes it significantly heavier than the Benchmade Bug Out and just slightly lighter than Demco AD 20.5. I think these knives compare so closely in blade shape and overall dimensions that they are the nearest competitors. And since all three of them compete for the same spot in your jean pocket, I thought it would be appropriate to compare the thicknesses. And as expected, the Bug Out is just slightly less thick and Demco is a little bit thicker. And another comparison I just had to make is a $40 Ontario Knives rat knife. Great knife, so that's why I have it. An icon. So both knives are flippers. This is a traditional flipper and this is a thumb stud flipper knife. And both of them have full liners and liner locks are roughly the same. The only thing I can say that the stock material for the liner on the rat looks just a hair thicker, just imperceptibly thicker, and where it locks on the blade, maybe you can see here, it's smack in the center, whereas the Buck's liner locks more to this side of the blade, which concerns me because if I were to do some heavy work with it, potentially this asymmetry may unlock the knife. So who would own this knife? I think it's a perfect gift item for an upcoming graduate, somebody who is outdoorsy and not necessarily a knife enthusiast that needs to have the latest, greatest lock and who's not going to sort of attack rocks and trees with this knife, but someone who will need to process game and fish occasionally and have something in a pocket that will not go dull, because this steel S45VN is a great low maintenance, very stainless, very easy to maintain steel. And speaking of maintaining, that sort of see-through skeletonized construction also facilitates cleanup if you did something messy with this knife. So not an enthusiast knife, but an excellent choice for an outdoorsman's gift. The next knife I never ever seen in person at any of the dealers that I visit, and it's a Terrain 365 Invictus made out of Teravantium. Made out of what? Teravantium. Teravantium is just a dendritic cobalt alloy. Easy. Actually, there's absolutely nothing simple about this alloy. Cobalt occurs in nature only in a suspended solution. Basically, it's melted with some other metals and has to be extracted. Or it could be found in more or less pure form in the meteorites that fell down to Earth. So can you imagine how expensive and difficult it is to extract cobalt? You can go on any forum related to knives and find so-called experts proclaiming why cobalt alloy is not interesting, how the super steels like this S45 VM here replaced it, how they're better cutters and have same corrosion resistance. Stop. You guys are comparing, diesel tractor engine to a Tesla electric motor. You're basically comparing things that, because they do the same function, you're assuming they have properties that you need to be comparing, but they don't. If you were to take a hardest file, I have these hardness testing files. This one is basically hardened to 65 Rockwell. And when I run it across the entire edge, it skids right off. And that is because the amount of carbon molecules exposed at the edge is much higher than in steels. Unlike a regular steel blade, it doesn't just slice through the wood, it sort of bites in it and then just saws all the way through. But enough about the science behind it, let's talk about the knife itself. It comes in this neat little pouch, like many knives do nowadays, and it has its own oil, and the card says that the oil was specially formulated to work with the titanium. All of the hardware is non-ferrous, non-magnetic, probably titanium alloy hardware. That back spacer also serves as a stop piece for the blade, which is usually a pin, so it's much more robust than in a regular knife. The action is perfect. It functions really, really well as a thumb stud opening knife. Snappy, perfect. I find the shape of the knife very appealing as well as extremely ergonomic. It weighs 91.5 grams, slightly heavier than 3.2 ounces. Funny enough, it's identical in weight to the buck sprint you just saw. The blade length is just a hair under 3 inches. Solid knife, very comfortable to carry and use, and it's a decent conversation piece as well. Next up is Reeves Inkosi. This one is an S45 VN steel, and I was eager to grab it before they replaced the blades with the MagnaCut. I just like S45 better for the type of applications I use the knife for. You've probably seen it more than a dozen unboxings of this knife on YouTube, so I won't get into what came with it. I don't have the same religious fervor for this knife as a lot of Chris Reeve tribe does. It's a decent knife, solid piece. It's not perfect out of the box. It needs a lot of break-in period. It's a little bit on the heavy side. The blade length is decent for EDC, just over 3.5 inches. Almost all of it cutting edge. Nice sharpening choil, 140.3 grams, and almost 5 ounces. So it's a pretty hefty boy. So people like to talk about tolerances on this knife. I think the knife is over-toleranced, which makes it prone to reacting to dirt and lack of lubrication. There is a reason they provide a bottle of lube with the knife. As I said earlier, I grabbed it fast because once they're gone, they're switching to MagnaCut and may never go back to S45 VN, which is one of my favorite steels. I kind of like that they put more jimping on this model than say on Amazon, because once it started breaking in, I was able to start doing this. And I don't know why is it important to me to have more than one way to open the knife, but I kind of like it. The blade is not a drop shotty blade. You have to really drive it down. So let me digress for a second here and tell you this. This was a great knife when it first came out, and it really put the entire world on high alert that American company can actually produce high quality, high precision cutting tools. In today's world, 20 plus years later, because they kind of stopped innovating, they are opening us to an attack from the foreign manufacturers. So to me, it's appalling that there are Asian companies that sell knives here for the same price or even higher price than these Chris Reeve knives. And I have no one to blame but Chris Reeve and other US manufacturers who sort of rest on their laurels and stop innovating once they have a good production model. So this is not some kind of flag-waving exercise for me. Having been a machinist and a manufacturing engineer, I think every one of us should do anything we can to preserve American manufacturing capabilities here in this country. It's strategic, it's moral, and it's just basically an obligation of ours to keep our country an industrial power and not a burger flipping nation. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are into pure badassness, you will really appreciate my next choice, Heretic Wraith. With this knife, there are several configurations you can choose from, but if I'm going to buy a knife named Heretic Wraith, I will pick the absolutely baddest, meanest looking color. There are several dozen reviews of this knife on YouTube, so I'm not going to get too much into detail. Let's just say that whoever designed this knife had been angry at the world for a while. This machine is designed for one purpose only: to be badass. It's a beefy knife, but surprisingly easy to operate one-handed. On closing, that is. It weighs in at exact same weight as Chris Reeve Inkosi, namely 5 ounces or 142 grams. T25 pivot, and the blade length on is slightly longer than the one on the Inkosi.
This is Elmax steel, by the way.
At about 3 and almost 3/4 inches. The most interesting, from a technical perspective, feature of this knife is its spring. Notice how smooth the spring is. I can hold the knife literally between my two fingers and retain control over the knife. If I try to do that with, say, Claymore, which is notorious for its robust spring, this is what happens. There's no way for me to retain it. Adamas, you cannot suspend it in the air and open the axis lock, but when I do that with Adamas, this is what happens. Very robust spring. Even Launch 1, well, Launch 1 did okay. So we'll just say they're in the same ballpark. So why is it important to me? Because I like to operate my knife with one hand. And here, it's easy. Next up is a zero tolerance 562 Hinderer design, large titanium frame lock, flipper, CPM 20 CV blade. This one ran great straight out of the box. Very easy action. I didn't have to get used to it, I just grabbed it. The only thing I did have to get used to is the fact that these are not thumb studs, they're just stop pins for the blade. And no matter how hard I tried, I could not open the knife using these studs. They're just not meant to be. Even though the handle shape, and that's probably my only gripe with this knife, the handle shape suggests that I should be somehow able to thumb flick it using thumb studs, but no. And if you have a different experience or somehow got it to work that way, please let me know in the comments, because I would like to be using thumb studs. Since most of my knives have them, I'm kind of naturally tending to use them rather than the flipper tab. Here you go. Please take a look and let me know what am I doing wrong if it's meant to be opened as a thumb stud knife. Anyway, everything else was great. Opens and closes very easily. I like the sound it makes both ways, in and out. Just a very pleasant knife. Oh wait, did I just... I guess yes. Alright, well, I guess in a polite company, when you don't want to flip the knife, you can just use the studs and pull the blade open. This is the heaviest of the batch, weighing in at 152.8 grams or 5.4 ounces. And here's a group portrait of my loot from California. Not a bad looking bunch of knives. Do you like them? I am not sure which one I like the best. Let me know which one of these 5 would you prefer and why in the comments. Don't go anywhere yet. The paper cutting test is coming up. Take a look. All right, and this is Chris Reeve versus Notepad paper. And this knife is extremely sharp. I'm not going to do pull cut, I'm just doing a push cut right here. Cuts the slice of paper. Here's the ZT. Not quite as sharp, but plenty sharp enough. Does the push cut almost as well. Heretic Wraith has a saber grind and about 40 degrees inclusive angle. So with its not so slicey geometry, I'm pleasantly surprised that it completes the push cut. And here's a knife from this new American company called Bach. Just kidding, just kidding. I'm just impressed that they stepped out of their comfort zone and used S45VN and a carbon fiber scale. And the last but not least, Terra 365 Invictus with a Teravantium blade. So I have not decided which one of these knives would be my favorite and how they stack up. If you enjoyed this video, please comment on which of these 5 knives did you like the best.